Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the the 10th talk of 2022, the Ottawa Winter Speaker Series hosted by the Nepean Sailing Club. My name is Park Davis. I'm going to be your MC tonight. There's two more talks, the next two Wednesdays, finishing on April 6th. The full listing of the talks is on the NSC website, nsc.ca. And just for your information, all the talks are being recorded. So if you want to see them again, look up anything that we've covered, you can do that. You search Nepean Sailing Club on YouTube and you'll find them all there. The talks are free. This year, however, we provided for donations using the Eventbrite system. Thanks to all of you who've already donated. As of today, we're approaching $1,700 according to the listing here, which is great. We really appreciate that. There's four of us that are working on putting these talks together each evening. Tony Wright's our webmaster, and he works to publicize the talks far and wide. Stephen Kidd works with scheduling and finding speakers, and behind the scenes working with Tony and me. And he also does double duty as alternate MC. Ron Evans is our video editor, and he uses the presentations each week and uploads them to the NSC YouTube channel. And finally, me, Park Davis, I'm taking care of the MC duties. So before I go on, if any of you would like to speak at some point, if you have a story to tell or some experiences related to boating, please come forward and contact any one of us, and we'll be happy to schedule you for sometime next year, because we're already thinking about our agenda for next year. Tonight's presentation. So before we do that, a couple of things. Please use the question and answer, the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen to type your questions, and we'll be getting to all of the questions at the end of the two speakers' presentations. So in any case, tonight, longtime members Cathy Duchesne and Rick Anderton are going to team up to talk about how to anchor and where on the Ottawa River. So Cathy has her list of favorite spots during summer days and nights on the Ottawa River. And Rick is going to share his experiences with anchoring techniques so that you can sleep well, knowing that you're awake. You're going to be awake at the same spot. Now, maybe I could ask Rick and Cathy to turn on their cameras so we see them. There's Cathy, and there's Rick. That's great. So Cathy and her husband, Dawn, have been cruising the Ottawa River for over 30 years. And so I wouldn't be at all surprised that she may be in that category of over 100 overnights. And Rick draws in a lot of his cruising experiences here in Ottawa, but also in Brockville and Kingston, and also from anchoring a houseboat on the Rideau and in charters in the British Virgin Islands. So I'm going to turn things over now to Rick and let you get started with your presentation on how to anchor and how to make sure you stay there next overnight.
Good. So thanks for this opportunity. And Tony is going to show my slides. So a nice picture view of a sort of fall anchorage there. And moving on, Tony, to the next one. So this is anchoring for cruisers. And this presentation is taken from one that was done by a member, the former owner of Loon, Ken Alders. So Ken is the one crediting with preparing these slides. And we did a live demonstration of that in 2019 in the East Room, complete with some more props and so on. Next one, Tony. Okay, so we're going to cover its main topics. I'm not going to read all the slides, but I'm just going to go through these categories. And so next, Tony. So we want to emphasize safety on this. You're entrusting your boat and the lives of your crew and your neighboring anchored boats to your techniques. So the master is responsible for the safe anchorage and safety of the vessel. And you can pretty well anchor anywhere, but Cathy's going to give you a lot of tips on the best places. And next, Tony. Okay, so I'm going to show you a bit here when I reverse my camera, but the fluke anchor, the traditional name, the Danforth, mine is similar and it's a fortress. Plow anchor will dig in and will accommodate some turning, especially scoop anchors. And I've been advised by the experts present that you should ask for an original Bruce, not the Chinese Bruce. So Ken suggests 2 anchors of different styles, depending on the situation and the type of bottom that you're anchoring on. And he also mentions 1 or more anchors simultaneously. The bow, 2 of them set at 60-degree angle is an option. I'm not a fan of the bow and stern because it can present some significant challenges on retrieval. But the one place I did it was anchoring a houseboat on the Rideau near a neighbor's cottage. We were on a small, quite narrow inlet near their cottage, and they didn't want the boat turning. So we did a stern anchor as well. Okay, next, Tony. So I'm going to switch here shortly and show you here in my floor some of the layout. But rope, when used for anchoring, is called a warp, used in combination with chain between the anchor and the warp. You can thread or make markers on your warp, the rope, to indicate the length that you've paid out. My own habit is I just count my arm lengths of as I feed it out. A snubber, there's different types. So using a nylon line, nylon warp, will give some stretch. There are actually snubbers that you can tie into your warp, and they you leave slack loop with that, and that gives stretch. Okay, so there's a kellet. So a kellet's a weight on the warp or rope that it doesn't increase your total anchorage strength in high winds, but it does give the same kind of effect as a snubber to some extent, that the kellet is weighing down the rode, and as the tension builds, it comes up. So that will also reduce the slamming of the boat in wave and wind. And I'm going to switch now and show you some things on the floor. Okay, so here's my anchor, and moving along, shackled to it is length of chain, the boat length is a good idea. And then at the top end of the chain, we're shackled to a spliced in eye on the road. And I have the amount of road here. You would normally uncoil it. Now, the most important thing here is make sure, and I'm not sure if you can see this very well because the lighting, there it is. Okay, so I got a bowline tying the line to a secure part of the boat so that we don't drop everything overboard and say, oops. And now, let me just show you. Next here is my kellet. So mine is a weighted tube. And I have a hook on it that I can slide down the road. So hook it onto the road here and slide it down. Mine, I use a retrieval line to bring it back up before we, okay, and sorry, there's better. So I can pull it back up to the top of the road and unhook it from my road. This one's also set up with a foam float tied at a depth. So that can serve as a indicator to other boats that this is my anchor line out off my bow. And if you stay outside that orange mark, you are not going to catch your keel on my road. If there's any point where you have to leave your anchor and want to be able to come back to it, I suggest that you use a fender and tie it on there. And white is a good choice because you can see it under various light conditions. And that will serve to allow you to get back and retrieve it. Okay, so going back to the presentation. So depending on the type of bottom that you're on, and Cathy's going to talk about some of those, what you're going to encounter on the Ottawa River. It could be mud and silt, goods for most anchors, and you probably bring some mud up here and want to splash it a bit to clear it before you put it onto the boat. Clay, sand, shale, rocky, and grassy bottoms could be more of a problem. So rock is a challenge. And one example I'm going to give, experience running a 420 race down at Brockville. Unfortunately, I didn't have any opportunity to speak to either my pin boat, start pin boat, or my finish line boat, because they had other duties for that regatta with respect to launching the competitors. And so I didn't get to meet with them and prepare before. When we got out there, I was amazed at how long they had set my finish line and radioed them wanting to shorten it. And they explained to me that they couldn't, that there's a flat rock bottom there, and they cannot get anchors to hold anywhere near me. So that's the kind of thing you need to avoid. Okay, next, please, Tony. So some topics to suggest. So check the chart for any restrictions. So there are places where anchorage is prohibited. Cathy can give you more information on those for the Ottawa River. Avoid a lee shore. You don't want to end up being blown ashore. When you're in the anchorage, the first boat sets the precedent as to where they're anchored and what remaining choices there are. And beware of the magnet effect. If you were there first, it's your right to speak to the newcomers, asking them to move. You want to make sure that through the night, you're not going to have close encounters. Next, please, Tony. Okay. So setting anchor, the steps, you want to check the forecasts. You want to choose a location that's sheltered from wind and waves, if possible. Check the charts for any obstructions and note the depths. And check for the other boats, how they have anchored. And bigger boats will often have different requirements than smaller ones. Calculate needed scope. Now, scope is a measure of the angle that your anchor line is running and ratioed to the depth. So let's say you're in 10 feet of water, but your bow is another 3 feet higher than the water line. So you're looking at 13 feet in that. And the length of line you let out as a multiple of that is your scope number. So for a lunch hook or a calm situation, 5-to-1 is probably good. If you're expecting weather at all, then you want to be more like 10-to-1. So as I already mentioned when I was showing you things on the floor, make sure that the bitter end of the anchor line is secured to the boat. And make sure the anchor line is ready to run free. And we don't want the foredeck to catch an ankle in a loop in the road and be pulled over. I think we had a cartoon similar to that in the preamble there. And you position your boat, start by motoring just a bit above or forward of where you're going to want to drop. And then as the boat moves back, drop the anchor, allowing time for the anchor to get traction. And next slide, Tony. So to set the anchor, you're going to reverse the engine, start to make slight headway, lower the anchor, pay out the road slowly as the boat drifts back so it stretches out cleanly. You don't want to just drop a bundle of it. At about 3-to-1 scope is a good point to get the anchor to get a good set by holding or cleating the road, and with the boat in reverse, just tug it a bit and you'll be able to feel that it's set. Let out some more road to get to something like 5-to-1 for lunch hook, 7-to-1 for comfort, 10-to-1 for storm. And then make sure the line is properly tied off on a bow cleat. Observe your position at that point to two objects on shore, and with reference to them, you'll be able to tell whether you've moved at all. And a final power set is good. And note your depth, set your GPS anchor alarm if you have one. And don't forget that it's a requirement to signal you're anchored. So an all-round white light for night and a ball-shaped display for day. Next. Okay, so this one's a little tricky to picture, but I'm going to draw your attention to the top 3 boats on the left-hand side. Then with a shift, we see that the 2 small blue paper clips and the large black one have got into the position of being alongside each other and probably contacting. So that's the kind of thing you want to avoid as you choose your position in an already busy harbor. Okay. So next, Tony. So weighing anchor or retrieving it, weighing is the preferred terminology. So the ease depends on the weight of the anchor, the depth of the road, the amount of chain you've got, the wind and sea conditions. So plan your approach for your exit before you get started, and motor slowly toward the anchor, staying downwind and bring in the rope. So foredeck is busy calling the rope back onto the deck. And your goal is to get directly over the anchor and then cleat the rode and then motor the boat forward till the anchor breaks free and then pull it all in. If you have a power windlass, then that's an alternative way to do it. And the crew will signal that the anchor is coming up and then try to just keep the boat in the same position. And the muscle on the foredeck is going to retrieve it all. Then once you've tidied up, you can sail slowly to your exit point from the harbor. Next. Okay, so Cathy's going to speak to the remaining charts there, but I would like to do a wrap up. So some homework for you for spring preparation. Talk to your dock neighbors or other members with similar boats. Practice on a calm day, go out to Crystal Bay and do 2 anchor and weigh anchor cycles, and then swap rolls and do the two more cycles. So that's the calm day assignment. Then pick a windy day and go back out to Crystal Bay, and with wind and wave, repeat those 4 cycles with the swap in between, swap rolls in between. And I'm turning things over to Cathy now. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm just going to make sure that I can share my screen with you. So we're going to do this one. So I'm Cathy Duchesne. I sail with my husband, Don. This is Corey Doon. Up here on our bow roller, you can see 2 anchors. We have a plow and we have a Bruce anchor. We carry about 40 feet of chain because we have a windlass. So we sleep at night on the Ottawa. We don't have any problems with this. And we've been doing this for many, many, many years. So I don't think you need to be nervous about doing this. It's a lot of fun. We treat our Ontario 32 Corey Doon as a floating cottage, really, on the Ottawa. This is our original crew. We started doing this in 1992 on a Mirage 25. So we've been at it for a little while. I just wanted to point out that there are many, many members of the Nepean Sailing Club who've been doing this for a while. There are a whole bunch of people who are attending tonight who've been anchored out at least 100 times. And I'm not the first person to talk about where to go and what to do. You can find a few other resources on the web and at the Nepean Sailing Club. One is Michael McGoldrick's Guide to Cruising the Ottawa River, and it's a virtual guide. It's a little bit old, but it still has a lot of great information. And both Ken and Park have written articles about anchoring and cruising the Ottawa before, and they're available on the Nepean Sailing Club website under the cruising page. Craig and Janice, who are former NSC members, ran a video site called Cruising Off Duty. And if you want to see some beautiful drone footage of some of the areas that we're going to talk about tonight, then you can go to their site. It's a little bit difficult to find the video, so I've actually listed the episodes that you might want to check because they've done a lot of different cruising and there's a lot of videos on their site. So we're going to talk about anchoring etiquette just a little bit to continue a tiny bit with Rick's talk. If you think that your docking skills are being assessed constantly by those people sitting up at the bar, just remember anchoring is even worse. When you get to the anchorage, it's a spectator sport and your neighbors are watching you. They're watching you partly because they want to make sure that they're going to be safe for the night as well. So when you do cruise into the anchorage, you want to cruise in and check it out and figure out where you're going to go. Everybody has to do this, but really watch your wake. We don't want our peanuts and beer going flying into our laps because somebody's firing through the anchorage. And take a look around to figure out how everybody else has anchored and how other boats have anchored, how much rod and chain they have out and what their swing pattern is going to be. If you're doing this for the very first time, get a friend, go up with them so that they can help you figure this all out. And in the Ottawa, it would be very unusual to go more than 7-to-1. And nobody uses bow and stern anchors, just so that you know. That's not part of the stuff that we have to do here. Bow and stern anchors are for very special circumstances. We've done it a few times up in Georgian Bay, trying to spider into a tiny little area, or off the Benjamin Islands where there's lots of rocks. Now, I'm almost afraid to give you this slide because anchoring communication is definitely one of the most fun things to watch when you're at an anchorage. But the person who's on the foredeck and the person who's on the helm have to be able to talk to each other somehow when they're anchoring. It often looks super slick. It's usually a spouse couple when they have a radio headset and they're chatting to each other through the radio headset. And it looks very cool when they don't do anything and the whole thing goes according to plan. But you just have to remember that it can be difficult to hear through those headsets. They are battery dependent. They're probably a great idea if you don't have your usual crew who's going to follow along with you. We use hand signals. We've tried the radio headsets before, but the hand signals are very reliable. Just make sure your helmsman can actually see you. And of course, you have to agree on what the hand signals are going to be. It can be a bit of a problem if you need both hands. The other problem is that our boat, the Yanmar diesel in our boat, sounds like a bag of hammers. And if I'm on the helm, there's no hope that Don can hear me at the bow if he's paying out or dragging in the anchor. So the communication only goes one way. It only goes from the foredeck back to me. So I'm thinking that maybe that's why he ditched the headsets, but that's okay. This is a suggestion for hand signals. There's no standard for this. The only thing I'd tell you is that the hand signal that you use for the guy who just cut you off on the freeway is not on the list. So as entertaining as it is to hear people yell and scream at each other in the anchorage, try not to do that. Try to get a system worked out between you and whoever's going to be handling your foredeck work if you're the helmsman. Being a good neighbor is important in the anchorage. You are not going to get invited for coffee in the morning if you've been having a late night party all night, letting your cell phone ring, letting your dogs yap all night, or running a really noisy generator. So just keep that in mind. It travels well over the water. And so think about your neighbors. And it is, as Rick mentioned, it is a finders keepers situation. The boat that's in there that's claimed a spot in the anchorage is supposed to get to keep it. And if you come in later and the captain of that boat feels that you're a bit too close, you're going to be asked to move. And you do get points if you move, actually. Some of those conversations can be a little challenging. It can be a little like trying to do those crucial communications conversations, but that is the general rule in the anchorage, just so you know. It's not always like this. This is a beautiful, big, huge moon, but these two boats are supposed to have anchor lights up there so we can spot them if you're coming in late, because it's the Ottawa. People do come in a little later at night. I just warn you that, again, you won't be in anybody's good books if you're using a giant searchlight to find your spot in the anchorage after dark. And no one likes their boat suddenly illuminated full blast at 11:30 at night when they're trying to get to sleep. So keep that in mind as well. Now, let's talk about where to go and what to do. So this is the Ottawa River charts. And if you haven't been out, there's a lot of water up here to explore, and it's all wonderful. If you don't have a set of charts like this, you should go to Channery and get some, because you never, even though you might have the fancy electronic equipment that tells you exactly where you are according to GPS, you need some kind of backup. You never know when that system is going to go down or what's going to go. And you should be able to not only use these charts, but read them properly as well. So we're going to talk about where to go. We're going to start at Nepean, and we're going to talk about Shirley's Bay and Elmer Island. We're going to talk about Penny's Point, Baskin's Beach, which is up here, Constance Bay, Moore Island, and a little bit further up the river as well. Now, the primary wind direction on the Ottawa, if you've ever sailed there, you'll know that especially on Saturday, it seems to always be blowing from the west and coming down the river. So you almost always have to tack up the river. It's rarely easterly, or a little less commonly from the east, except maybe on Sunday afternoon when you're trying to get home again. So let's talk about some of the great spots on the Ottawa, what to do, and how to get there. The first two spots, which are Shirley's Bay and Elmer Island, you can see if you're up on the deck at the sailing club. So the first one is Shirley's Bay, which is just around the corner, and the other one is Elmer Island, which is across from the Elmer Sailing Club. And you can also see that on a good day from the deck. So you don't need a lot in order to figure out where they are and how to get there. The thing about both, these are not anchorages per se. These are just areas to drop a hook for a little while and go for a swim or go for lunch. I would not stay overnight at any of these spots because there just isn't enough protection from the wind directions and the changes in wind directions to make them useful as an anchorage. The other thing is, if you look carefully at this, you'll notice that there are a lot of rocks and a lot of shallow spots in the Ottawa, and you need to know how to read these charts properly to get there. So for instance, you have to go all the way out to the bifurcation buoy and come back to get into Shirley's Bay. If you try to go straight across, you'll hit something. And the same with Elmer Island. You can cross Elmer Island on this side, but not on this side. You take your keel in hand and you're likely to bang into something if you try to go the wrong way around the island. So get a set of charts and figure out how to use them properly. And then you'll have lots of fun and stay out of trouble. The first place you're probably going to go if you've never actually anchored out before is Penny's Point. And there's a reason for that. It's the closest proper anchorage on the Ottawa. It's beautiful. The scenery there is absolutely spectacular. And the bottom here is excellent. It's usually sort of weeds and mud, and there's very few spots where your anchor will not hold if you anchor out properly and use the proper scope. And use the old salts method of paying out your anchor slowly, powering it in properly in reverse, and then checking to make sure that you're not moving. The other thing is this lovely point protects you from most of the winds that come in through the west and from the sort of southerly areas as well. Now, Penny's, this is a very quiet day at Penny's. It doesn't usually look like this. This has to be midweek and sort of crappy weather that nobody else came for. Most of the time, the anchorage looks like this, like lots of boats on the weekend. So you need to have some idea of things like scope and how much swing room you're going to need in an anchorage. And the other thing is that this picture is actually taken from a bit of a weird angle because this is an easterly wind. So if it's going to be like this overnight, Corrie-Dune will not be there. We will be moving up to Baskin's Beach because there is a very long fetch from the city all the way back up to Penny's if the wind is going this direction. And if there's going to be any significant wind overnight, you're going to be bouncing around in your bunk a lot if it looks like this for the nighttime. One of the other advantages of Penny's is it's well protected. So I'm married to an insatiable tinkerer, and I'd rather not spend all of my weekends and outings at the dock doing stuff. So we just pack up the tools and let Don putz around at the boat on Saturdays up at the Anchorage, and it works fine. And there's often other people that he can recruit to give him a hand with something if he wants. So, or grab another insatiable tinker and enjoy the little chores that they have to do together. The other nice thing about Penny's is that there's the city of Ottawa puts out docks right at Penny's Point, really nice dinghy docks. And so that means it's a great spot for you to meet friends and family who want to come up and sail or join you for the afternoon. It's not a long drive from the city. It's about 40 minutes out to the site. And then your family and friends can meet you up there, especially when it's not COVID. We used to often sail on the weekends with friends, and what would happen is Dawn would sail up with our children, and if I was working, I would join them later on the Saturday, just drive up and not actually lose the entire weekend because I was working for part of it. So we found that really helpful. This is our ship's cat, Guinan. She doesn't actually require much shore leave or any. But the Penny's is a great spot to bring your pets because they have dinghy docks so that your dogs can go ashore easily. And they have amenities for people too. When it's not, when the site is open, like when COVID settles down a little bit, then there's bathrooms up at Penny's, and there's also showers that are actually essentially owned by the club. And you can get the code for the showers at the sailing club office and then use the showers up at Penny's if you like. So it's just a nice extra treat to have a hot shower on a Sunday morning if you're up there for the weekend. I'm a real sucker for the house at Horaceville, which is the name of the site that was established in the 1800s when Hamnet Penny set up here. The house is a great landmark. It makes it easy to find the site, even at night, because it's lit up at nighttime. So it makes a great landmark on the Ottawa to know where you are. And it's lovely. When the museum is open, it's got all kinds of activities often going on and various displays that it's running. And if you're interested in any of that, then there's information on the Penny Estate Museum at the City of Ottawa site and also at Heritage Trust Ontario. I should point out that you can walk around the site quite a bit, but you do need to stay off the point because it's a protected area. You can walk behind it though and see all of the Ottawa River behind. After you pass the Dunrobin shore, you'll hit the next landmark, which is Port of Call. It's a marina partway up the river. This is not an anchorage, but it's a good site to just know about so that you know where you are. We have not been to the Rocking Dock, which was a fast food truck that was set up in the last couple of years or so. And Port of Call Marina does sometimes have things if you've forgotten stuff or need ice or something like that. You can walk there. It's quite a hike from Baskins Beach, but that's also open to you. The next site, which is a great one if there's an easterly breeze, is Baskins Beach. The beach over here is, and this fenced in or buoyed in area for swimming is actually part of the campground that's up behind these trees. So they don't take very kindly to us using that area, but the swimming at Baskins is still pretty good anyway. Now, the other nice thing about Baskins Beach is that there's a little food restaurant, a tiny little shack that's back in behind these trees that's part of the campground. And they serve excellent greasy spoon breakfasts on the morning. You can go in and get bacon and eggs and toast and pancakes and things. And they also have ice cream and stuff like that. So it's fun to go ashore there and use some of the amenities that are there. You do have to be careful of a few things when you're anchoring here, though. It's quite rocky on the bottom. So we have had the experience of having to try to find a spot where our anchor will hold multiple times. And there's some shallow spots over here. So be careful that when the wind direction shifts, you're not going to land up on an area that's only 1 or 2 feet deep. This is the rock that continues along Baskins Beach, and you can go ashore here. This shows you actually what some of the bottom is like, which is white there. Often in the summertime, there's a big corn roast and cookout up at Baskins. The club either rents the site from the campground, or there's also a small site here that's owned by Britannia that can be rented. And we've had some great parties up there on the beach over the years. When you go ashore, be sure to have a look at the fossils. There's some very interesting fossils in the rocks there. And I have seen crinoids and gastropods in that fossil. So it's fun to go fossil hunting, especially with the kids, and have a look at what's in the shale and the rock at Baskins. It's great. Just a little bit further down the river, up the river from Baskins, is 12 Mile Island. It's, again, not an anchorage. It's a nice landmark, though. And you can take your dinghy or your kayak if you're dragging one and go and explore the 12 Mile Island. Last year, when we were up there at a certain time of year, there was a whole tern colony up there fishing. And that was fun to watch and just see how it was going. We took our little motorized dinghy and went around to have a look at the island and see what the birds were doing. The most fabulous thing about Baskins is that it's the only anchorage on the Ottawa, really, that has an unobstructed view to the west. And so this is where you get those spectacular sunsets that people have all the pictures of in their collection if they've been coming up here for a while. The next spot up will be Constance Bay. And lots of people know about Constance. Because there's a lot of cottages up here as well. This is a big sandy bay. It's got lots of space for plenty of boats, so that's helpful. And the bottom is sandy, so it's easy to get anchored. The swimming is pretty good. There's lots of shallow water here going into the beach. The only thing you have to watch for is the underground cable that runs between Constance Bay and the opposite side of the bay. So watch your charts and make sure that you're well away from that. You do not want your anchor to be hooked up on that for an overnight. It will not be good. It's pretty easy to figure it out, though, if you look at charts properly and just make sure that you're anchored away from there. Constance Bay also has some great spots to go ashore. This is a sort of a Google map picture of Constance. So you can dinghy ashore in here, and there's a little, just a little laneway that goes into the center of town. And there's a whole bunch of amenities at Constance that are fun. The Constance Bay General Store has ice. It has most of the essentials, and it also sports a very small LCBO. So if you've forgotten something or need reprovisioning, you can get things there. Just a little up from that is the Bay Cafe that just opened. And it's a lovely place to go for breakfast and goodies. And we did that quite a bit last year. If there is a pharmacy there, and way up here is in the last couple of years or so, there's been a food truck. It's also an ice cream truck that's run by the Carp Creamery. It's about 1 kilometer to walk up, so you earn your ice cream if you're walking all the way up and back. But great spot to visit and to see all the things that are there. There's also a pizza place in here that some of the other boaters really enjoy. You go down the road a little further behind St. Gabriel's Roman Catholic Church, in the parking lot at the far end, there's actually a trail through the woods that's fun to do if you're into walking. Of course, there's a nice long beach to walk and enjoy. Just be really careful out on this point here. It's a great spot and it's a lovely point, but every couple of years or so, People who come and visit Constance, not usually the boaters, but the regular visitors will come out here and someone drowns because they don't realize how bad the drop off is off this point. The water goes just suddenly very, very deep. So non-swimmers should not be there without life jackets. Watch your kids and make sure that they have life jackets on if you're taking them out to the point. This is Canada Day weekend, thanks to Jeff for the picture. And Constance Bay will look like this. Lots of motorboats, lots of kayaks, lots of kids, everybody enjoying the water, the sun, the sand. So it can be pretty busy, and a bit noisy. But as I say, there's plenty of room out here. It's a big bay for everybody to be anchored. Canada Day has the advantage of the locals really love to run fireworks. And so normally Constance Bay takes pride in the fireworks display that all the local people put on. And it's fun to watch. It's a good way to spend your Canada Day weekend if you want to be way up on the water. It's not as spectacular as Parliament Hill, but it's still a great place to stop and enjoy the action. Right around from Constance, so this would be the point out here, is Buckham's Bay, which looks long and narrow, and it looks beautiful. It looks like it would be an ideal place to shelter from the wind and the weather. But I'd warn you that the Ottawa River used to be a prime spot for running logs. And when we first started sailing, there was a lot of logs and a lot of cribs full of logs on the river. What we've found is that Buckham's Bay still contains a great number of these. And so if you put your anchor down, you can find that you pull up a lot more than you had in mind when you go to weigh anchor in the morning, because you can find yourself attached and wrapped around a very, very large log from one of those beautiful white pines that used to be up here. Our next anchorage is Moore Island, and this is an actual anchorage along with Constance, Baskins, and Pinnies. So Moore Island is a beautiful little horseshoe-shaped island out in the middle of the Ottawa. It's on the Quebec side, and there's a great big sandbar out here. It does offer some good westerly protection, but I would stay away from it if there's an easterly wind, because once again, the fetch is really long and it can be quite bouncy. It looks like this, so it's fairly small. It'll take a few boats. This is a really busy weekend at Moore, I think. Tony sent me this picture. The other thing to realize is that this is the spit that comes out, the nice sandbar, and often there's lots of power boats attached there. The issue is there's lots of marshy areas around here, and so mosquitoes are pretty fierce up at Moore Island if you're in mosquito season, which is on the Ottawa most of the summer except for September. And next up is the village of Quillon. Now, Quillon is not an anchorage, but it is another spot that you can stay. There's some docks at Quillon right here where you can tie up and go and check out town. There is some stuff in town. This is a fairly decent walk, and I think Gavin's Hotel is still open. And there's also a little place here where you can get gas. There's a gas station here that sells ice as well. So that can be handy. We don't stay at Quillon overnight. And part of the reason is the Quillon ferry, which you can see here. It goes right across the river, and it goes across the river all night long. So there's lots of clanging and loading and unloading of cars. So I'm not a fan of being there for the night. But it's still a useful spot and another interesting place to be on the Ottawa River. Be careful of the ferry. They've changed it to a cable ferry. And I took this directly from the cable ferry's website to give you a few rules about what you're allowed to do around a ferry and how to pass it. Make sure that you pass, as they say, 800 feet behind it. Try to pass this when the ferry is at rest. Hooking those ferry cables is no fun at all. It will dead stop you. And the cable's very close to the surface at the terminal. So just pay attention to where the ferries are. Now, the things that you'll see next on your chart is Pontiac Bay, and that's the end of the Ottawa River that's navigable from the sailing club. And that's because this is the dam right here, and this is Fitzroy up here. So there is no way to go further than this on the river in this direction. Now, back in the 90s and early 2000s, we used to have some volunteers that would go up here and put out markers for this channel that goes into Pontiac Bay. That hasn't happened in a lot of years. So it's maybe it will again sometime, but it's very difficult to get through this channel. As you can see, it's quite shallow and quite narrow through here. There have been some GPS charts that have shown you what to do and how to get through it. But your GPS has to be really accurate. And you just have to be off by a couple of feet here, and you'll end up finding yourself pretty hard aground. And there's not a lot of other people up there to help you get off again. There used to be mooring balls in this sections, but I don't think that there haven't been any for many years. So the only place that you can really anchor is in front of the Tim Hortons camp, if you can actually get in there, if you have a completely retractable keel, for instance, and can follow a GPS trail in. So we haven't been up there for a long time, and most of the people that I talk to who've been anchoring and cruising the Ottawa for a long time have also not been up there for a while. But perhaps we'll manage to get it reorganized again sometime. So Pontiac Bay, not really navigable. The bottom is a problem because most of it's rock. And the other thing to just remember is the water level fluctuates because the dam is there, and it's the outflow for the dam. So we have been up there many years ago on a mooring ball, and that's one of the few times that we woke up in the morning and we're just on the bottom because the water level had dropped. So that's all the spots that are there. And I thought I'd maybe notice that 40% of people hadn't done this overnight before, hadn't anchored overnight before. It's really so much fun. And I thought maybe I'd provide you with a quick grocery list in case you've never done this before. If you've camped before, though, or done anything like that, then it's pretty similar. Bring your favorite stuff. I'd warn you that sailing is super social. So when we're allowed to be together, then you can expect company, and bring lots of snacks and lots of extra beer, wine, rum, whatever your favorite is, tea, in order to entertain the rest of the anchorage, because there'll be there's plenty of coming and going. Don't forget propane and ice, and try easy things at first, pre-prepared stuff or easy stuff that you can bring. We have, I don't actually do it this way. We have a barbecue, a stove, and an oven on board Corydon, and we use them all. So I actually stock my boat with flour, sugar, baking powder, salt, and things like shortening and all kinds of stuff, and lots of snacks and things, so that I don't have to lug as much stuff back and forth, and so that I can make whatever I like. That's why Corydon has biscuits in the morning, and we're quite popular with coffee from time to time when people are around. If you don't have access to all those things, then bring easy stuff. Many people do an order out and bring along their favorite Thai or ethnic food and just heat it up. So I hope the grocery list helps if you haven't done this before. if you haven't been overnight, then think about some of the comforts of home that you're going to want. There's nothing worse than having that at 3 o'clock in the morning. So bring your mosquito netting. We have mosquito netting that just literally goes over the top of our hatches. And it's universal, so it's very easy to get. And we also have a large one that just goes over the whole companionway. Back in the day, we used to have a dining tent that we would put and literally drape over the entire cockpit so that we could sit out and enjoy our dinner and enjoy our evening with our friends without being eaten alive. We'd take out the supports, the vertical supports of the dining tent, and just keep the horizontal roof supports on and just string it from our boom and just let it flop over the whole thing. And other people have done that, or they've got bed netting from places like IKEA and put that over their cockpit so that they can be comfortable. You'll need some kind of a sunshade because it can be fairly brutal out there. So a lot of people bring a tent fly, or they bring something else that will protect them from the sun. We're fans of a good bed. So one of the things that you can do, just so you know, is you can replace those lumpy cushions if you don't like them, and get a custom bed fit for your boat. So we went to like a mattress manufacturer like Le Pensée and went out and got an entire bed made for our V-berth, which was handy. So bring along the things that will make life really enjoyable for you when you're staying overnight. Lots of food, lots of stuff. And if you've not anchored before, find a friend. There's plenty of us, lots and lots and lots of us who have experience being out there. So find somebody to go with you that can help you with your anchoring and your anchoring technique the first time around, and help you out if you've forgotten something, show you where to put your boat so that you won't swing, all of that stuff. And go up and enjoy the river. There's a ton of water up there. It's a great spot, and we're really lucky to have it here. It's just wonderful in the summertime. So I'll give this back to Park so that he can run some questions for us.
Thank you very much, Cathy, and thanks as well to Rick on the techniques. So all sorts of interesting things here. While the questions are slowly rolling in, I guess I'd say a couple of things just to emphasize what you've already said in terms of etiquette. Sort of like each next boat coming into an anchorage has to fit in or leave. So in other words, you sort of move in, you see who's there, and it's sort of like they're all in concrete. They will not move, and they should not have to move. You have to make sure that when you get there, you can fit in and not cause any difficulty to them. And then the next guy after you has to give you the same rights. And so that's sort of like how it works. Why? I don't know, but it seems to make sense, particularly if you're the first boat. So next thing, I guess, you talked for a moment about the wind direction overnight, and the NSC website has a couple of very good forecasts. One is called Sail Flow, and one is called Windy, I believe. And anybody that's going to stay overnight, I always do, is check and see if it's going to be a 15-knot wind all night, and I don't go, or else I look very, very carefully as to where I'm going to anchor. If it's going to be 5 knots, I'm not too worried to almost anywhere. But and if it's going to be thunderstorms, I don't like lightning in the middle of the night, particularly if I'm in a crowded anchorage with all sorts of other people. So, and the last thing, you talked about anchoring communications, Cathy, and you talked about the radios. And for somebody that wants to buy one, actually, the name that I got in the United States, the trade name was called a marriage saver. And it sounds funny, but if you've ever been in Anchorage watching others come in, as usually the male who happens to be stronger and able to lift the anchor and so on is on the bow letting it in, and his wife perhaps is at the stern trying to figure out whether he wants me to go forward or aft or starboard or port, and you hear the screaming going on using a radio, the so-called marriage saver, and that's really where the name came from. It works very well. So on the basis of that, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go over some questions and answers here now. There's a question here, Rick, what length of boat are you anchoring and how does the anchor equipment change with the size of your boat?
Okay, so my boat's a Mirage 24, and so I'm not anchoring a big boat. But Cathy mentioned mooring balls, which reminded me that I didn't mention our BVI experience, and I relate that to our slide 12 about the paper clips and the swing. So we had anchored, we had done mooring balls, we had done docks, but we were in a mooring ball field, nicely tied up, and we realized that an adjacent boat, which had come across the Atlantic from Europe, was not on the mooring balls. It was on at least 7-to-1 scope and maybe 10-to-1 scope. So he's going to swing incredibly more than anybody tied on a mooring ball. So with a mooring ball, you tie your bow lines directly through the loop that's floating there, and it goes straight down to a massive anchor that isn't going to move. So you're not going to swing much more than just your boat pivoting around its bow. He's swinging incredibly. So my wife got concerned about this, and I sat there through the evening watching the whole thing and concluded that we were out of his range. But a late arrival came in and took a mooring ball astern of or seemingly astern of this foreign vessel. And I was watching that and thinking, that's going to be close. And just as it got dark, we heard a bunch of shouting from the catamaran. I'm not sure if the folks on the foreign boat were even aware of it or whether they slept through it all, but there were people on the cat. It was a big cruising cat, right? They were aggressively pushing this foreign boat away from them. So I don't know how much sleep they got that night. Anyway, I just wanted to cover that one that I'd forgotten until Cathy mentioned mooring balls.
Okay. Sorry, Cathy.
I was just going to say, so the two things about the size of your boat that affect your anchoring are the size of the anchor that you need. You know, you have to have a bigger anchor if you've got a bigger boat, and the other, just the basics. And the other basic thing is your distance from the water to the bow of your boat will affect how much road you need, right? So the bigger boats are often a little higher off the water, so you need more road because you have to take that into account.
I guess if I could add a third point, normally they say that you need at least the length of your boat in chain. So my boat actually came with 50 feet of chain. I don't have a 50-foot boat, but I haven't bothered to change it and have never moved. So in fact, probably the chain weighs as much as it does weigh far more than the anchor. So. Yeah,
same for us. We've never moved and we have 40 feet of chain for a 32-foot boat.
Right. There's a question here about setting 2 anchors as standard practice on the river. And I guess I'll answer that myself, saying I've never heard of anybody doing it on the river. And the other thing is you'll be sort of written off any anchorage if you use it because you won't swing and everybody else will smash into you in the middle of the night. Everybody else will swing, you won't. So don't do it.
Right.
Oh, Brian added a note to that saying 2 bow anchors is what he's talking about.
No.
Again, nobody does 2 bow anchors.
No.
Yeah. No, Ken's charts show 2 bow anchors at 60-degree separation. And he also mentions bow stern, but he doesn't speak to bow stern significantly.
The
Yeah,
only
those
time,
techniques are for specific anchorages in specific conditions. The Ottawa is not one of those areas.
no, the only time I've ever seen two anchors used is like a bow anchor and a stern anchor is in a narrow tidal area where the current changes. And everybody uses two anchors because you want to stay more or less in line with the current that rips from left to right or maybe east to west at one time and then west to east at another time. Any tips for solo anchoring? Rick?
I've done it. I wouldn't want to do it in heavy weather. But yeah, with my Mirage 24, I have anchored solo effectively. For example, go up to Elmer Island, put the anchor into the sand there, and it means that you're doing it with your muscle rather than having the assist of the motor for breaking the anchor out.
And I guess really more than anything else, you do everything much more slowly because you can drop the anchor and then you have to run to the stern, or you let out a certain amount, you run to the stern, you put it in reverse and you check if you're staying there, then you may let a little bit more. So it may take you a bit longer.
Right.
I heard the docks at Queon are in shallow water now, maybe 3 feet or less. Can anybody confirm that? I haven't been up there in years.
I haven't been to the new docks, so I don't know what they're in now, but somebody else may know. Tony doesn't know?
Sorry, no, I haven't been there in years either.
Okay. The question here about Pontiac Bay. At one time it was a great place, according to this chap, to anchor. It's a shame there's no markers to get into the bay anymore. I went in there once in my life with a boat with a retractable keel, and I hit bottom here, there, and everywhere. There's lots of exercise, just retracting the keel and letting it down a bit and then bring it back up again as you bumped along, even with the markers. So maybe I didn't pay as much attention as I should have to the markers, but it's a crazy channel to get in there. And if you don't have a mooring ball in there, which there aren't any now, you'll be trying to anchor on shale, which you can't do it. So
I believe there's a bottom next to the camp, like that. You could actually anchor on the bottom there.
If you get that far.
If you can get that far. When the markers were out, we used to do it all the time.
Yeah, you could do it, but
yeah. I think somebody in chat has been up to Queon, so I don't know what they found at the docks, but
Yeah, Mason confirms that the Queon docks are very shallow right now. He says he was up there last season.
I see. What is the thought of anchoring and tying up with another boat? In other words, rafting, I assume overnight.
So we used to do it all the time. We don't do it anymore. Just because there's always that probabilité d'averse, on the radio, where you might get hit with thunderstorms in the summer, even on good days. There's always a small probability of bad weather. And so we've had problems with dragging if you have too many, if you're rafted up. There's often, if the wind direction changes, the fenders squeak and you bounce differently, and it can be a big mess. So we've decided a long time ago that we're not doing that in an overnight anymore. We'll do it during the day, but then everybody has to peel off for the night. There's been very occasional exceptions where it's dead flat calm for the night.
Yeah, I agree, Cathy. I've never done it overnight. I think it's the noise would bother me all night, because even if it's calm, there's still that squeak of the fenders back and forth and a little bit of nudge here and there. So if we can, we'd like it quieter still. So the question here, I thought you had to reverse to weigh anchor so you don't drive over your road. I guess I'll just mention that you drive up until you're over your anchor and pull up the line tight, and then cleat it and just wait for the waves to release your anchor from the bottom. And so usually it just comes up by itself, but if it's a long way down, then it may take a little while, a minute or two, for it to come loose.
Right, but you don't motor up over your road. Your bow person is pulling in the line as you motor up.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. Only once do you do that. Then you have to go over the side and take it off your prop.
Yes, the high-speed winch.
Something I learned, if I can pipe in a second, is that works well for me if it's really dug in. For instance, if when you set the anchor, you put your engine in reverse to really dig it in, or otherwise, if it's just dug in, to motor a wide circle around it to loosen it that way. That's what they teach in the basic cruising course and the intermediate cruising course as well. So but you do have to make a wide circle so you don't get it. So the road has to be tight. So you cleat it to the bow tight when you're right over it. And then you go in a wide circle around so you don't get it snagged in your propeller.
Okay.
I would say you always should, when you put your anchor down, you should always put your boat in reverse at some point now, and make sure that it's powered in properly, because otherwise it may just be rolling around on you on the bottom. It may not be.
Oh yeah, I'd like to mention another thing that Ken recommends, and that is Ken always dives down and inspects his anchor.
Mm.
And that's the water.
The problem, of course, is that in many areas of the Ottawa, you could dive down if you wanted, but you won't see squat down there. Like if you're at Penny's and you dive down, you can try, but you won't see anything if you're down 10 feet in the mud. It's
no, but you can feel if you
can feel it.
If you pull yourself down the road to the anchor, you can physically inspect the anchor even if you can't see anything.
There's a comment here by someone who says that keeping track of how much road you have let out, I have it marked with a tape every 10 feet. It helps to know how much you've let out and check it off against what you need for a particular area.
Right.
And I guess just a comment to say that I think we normally anchor in maybe 10 to 15 feet of water. That's sort of what you're expecting to anchor in. If you start anchoring in 30 or 40 feet of water, then I have to pull up all my chain as well as my anchor, which is a whole lot heavier than if you're in just 10 feet where you just have to pull up, 10 feet of chain plus the anchor. Big difference.
All the anchorages in the Ottawa are running about 10 feet, approximately 10, maybe a little more, 11, 12. But all the anchorages that we were talking about, the major ones, are all that kind of depth.
So marking the anchor or the road, Ken talks about threading a colored thread through it. If you're choosing tape, Cathy may have some ideas on good surgical tape that you would use. I wouldn't use the plastic electrical tape. I'd be afraid of it all falling off.
Actually, I do use the electrical tape, and it's worked surprisingly well, and it's very quick and slick, easy to do.
Okay, so you must wind it on really tight, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
At one point, all our road was all had lashing on it at each marker. That's a little more complicated, but.
There's just a comment here by a chap that says, if there's zero super low wind, Crystal Bay can be used as an overnight spot. it's nice and it's close to the club and good swimming. And that's true. It's almost like you can anchor anywhere if you actually trust the weather forecaster.
Yeah, and lots of people do anchor overnight at Elmer, and I've seen people anchor at Crystal Bay too. It's just that if you're new to this, it's not what I would suggest that you do it unless you can really trust the weather forecast.
Right. Now, there's a question here about will the slides in the presentation be made available? And I think they are going to be available in the recording as soon as Ron Evans uploads that to the NSC YouTube channel, and you'll be able to check it out there. So I'd say maybe in a week or so. Is that about right, Tony?
It should be within the week. It usually takes a few days just to get the recording ready, and depends on where Dave Bradley is in the world before it gets uploaded.
Oh, very good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, did you want one thing about the marking the road? For $5, you can pick up a set of Anchor Road markers that actually have the depths already marked on them, and you just thread them through your road. So if you've got like twisted road, you just pull them through, and they're actually anything under 100 feet is colored green. The next depth is colored yellow, and then the final depth is colored red. So if you've got 300 feet of road, you can mark every 30 feet with one of those markers. That's what I use on mine, and I find that's what's nice is actually being able to read the depth when it's down at the water. You say, "Oh, I want 60 feet in the water," and I can see exactly when I got 60 feet there.
Okay.
Saves losing counting bits of thread going by.
Back to the question about the slides being available. The slide in my deck, number 17. Number 17 is the links that Ken put in. So those are active links that won't work, I don't think, from the recording, but would work from having the PowerPoint or other way of pasting the links into an available item. So that'll be nice to put on the website.
Okay, we'll leave that to Ron to figure out how to do that.
Well, I can actually, I'll put a post up on the website and leave it up there for a couple of weeks after this session.
Good, Tony.
Okay. Yeah, there's another comment here. Colored tie wraps work well for marking road. So another way of doing things. Any guidance on places to stay away that may not be self-evident from the charts? The many cribs, etc. I don't think there's that many cribs left in the river that I'm aware of, except way up near the bay, just before you get to Moore Island on the Quebec shore. There might be something in there, but I don't think anything, Cathy?
Yeah, I think they've all been taken out except for the spot that you described. It's pretty good. The rest of it, everything else that we've ever hit on the water is all on the chart.
But Cathy did mention the mosquitoes at Moore Island. So unless you're well prepared with the mosquito netting that she mentioned, it's not a good place to stay. Just my experience on doing a distance race up there and back. We were running late and it was miserable in that area.
Yeah, don't forget off. Like, I mean, it's great to have the mosquito netting, but you need mosquito repellent as well. So we have a question here. If it's the very first time you're going to try out spending the night on the river, what would be your first choice?
Absolutely Penny's, because it's close and easy to get to, and you're bound to find somebody else who's going there who can give you a hand. So that would be it. And as I say, the only exception to that would be if there's going to be a stiff easterly wind that day.
Yeah, and I think maybe if you're going to be there the first time, you may want to go on a Wednesday or Thursday, something like that. You go on a Friday or Saturday, there could easily be 40 boats all trying to fit in.
Yeah, there could, although, you know, for most young families who are doing this for the first time, or they're doing it with kids, they only have the options of going on the weekends. So
yeah.
leave early and have your friends take you up so that you have the finders keepers kind of rule and you're well established before the rest of those 40 boats show up, and then they have to anchor all the way down the shoreline.
Okay, good idea. There's a question here. Sorry, Rick, go ahead.
I'd offer a caution on going to Constance. Make sure you pay attention to the MOT marks. I've seen so many boats on the sand there before by trying to turn into, oh, there's a beautiful bay. We'll just go in there.
No.
Got to go way out around to get in there.
Yeah, you need the charts.
Yeah, there's not a lot of cribs, but you have to pay attention to the charts. Yeah.
And by the way, if anybody, you should as well not only get the paper charts, but there is Navionics boating, which I think is about $20. You can put it on your cell phone. Oh, where's my cell phone? There's my cell phone. And so you can use both of them at the same time. And just as a plan B will be paper, or the plan B will be your cell phone, Navionics.
Mhm.
So
The free version also works well.
yeah. A question, is 5-to-1 typical on the river or 7-to-1 in weather? 7-to-1 is what I normally use. And at times I've gone to 10-to-1, although maybe that's overkill. So Cathy?
Yeah, I would say we most often use 7-to-1. 5 if it's going to be really light and we're just going to be there for a little while. Not
Yeah.
a problem. We can do that. But between 5 and 7.
Yeah, I called 5-to-1 my lunch hook.
Mhm.
Yeah, basically you're up and you're awake and you're
Yeah.
looking around at the time. So, I mean, if you do start to drift, it doesn't really matter because you can take action. But if it's 3 a.m. and everybody's snoring, then you don't want to be 5-to-1. So if you're towing a tender, it says here, don't forget to tie it close before anchoring to avoid getting its line cut up or line caught in your prop.
Yeah,
Go
when
through
you-
lead winch again.
Yep. The other thing is if it's behind your boat and you're in a dark anchorage, it's not a bad idea to get $1 or $2, put it into a solar light on your dinghy, because you don't want somebody thinking, oh, well, that's the stern of the boat, and cutting between you and your dinghy, because they come in overnight.
Mhm.
Can you pitch a tent on those islands? And I suspect in Moore Island you could, but you'd have to share it with the mosquitoes.
Yeah, and the Moore's pretty, we've kind of looked at it and thought, I don't think we can get a tent on here. It's pretty marshy, most of it.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, there's not a lot of solid ground on Moore. There's a little bit, but you'd have to kind of hike in a little bit in order to get to some solid spot where you can put a tent. I don't think you're allowed to camp there. You're definitely not allowed to camp at Penny's. The only time I've ever camped there is when I got permission from the city to take a bunch of Girl Guides up there. The other problem is, of course, washrooms, right? Like there's no washrooms ashore at any of these places. I think you might be able, I'm not sure, but I think you might be able to camp at Baskin's if you pay. Like they have some spots for tents.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's probably true.
At the campground that you can camp there. There is no place that I know of at Constance to camp.
No, not that I'm aware of. No, it's a public beach, really. Yeah. There's a question here about, are mosquitoes prevalent all along the river or mostly just at moors?
Oh no, they're prevalent everywhere. It's a joy being at Penny's early in the season, and there's just this cloud of mosquitoes out if it's calm outside your netting.
I guess if I could comment, I'd say that we haven't been particularly concerned with mosquitoes because if you're a little bit offshore,
Yeah, it helps.
then there's always a little bit of air going past your boat. And for some reason, they don't seem to be as bad. And I don't know why, but we haven't been bothered particularly with them.
Okay. Mhm.
So depends on where you are. In Constance Bay is not bad either, because you're usually about 50 or 75 yards offshore. And there's a little bit of wind there as well.
Yeah, if it's windy, it's good. If there's enough wind, it's good.
Yeah. So
There is a short interval when there's the shadfly season, and your boat deck is going to be covered in them.
Oh, yeah, that too.
they don't bite, at least. They don't make noise at night, but they do look miserable. So there's an offer for somebody to join you, Cathy. Can I come with you one night? Okay.
I saw that question and I'm going, yeah. No problem. Sandra can come with me.
With that gentleman, Cathy, I think, is in the blue book. And if you are also a member of the Nepean Sailing Club, you can look Cathy up. And Cathy, are you open for consultations?
Oh, sure. What the heck?
Yeah. Okay. So you could give Cathy a call. It's under Dawn Duchesne or Cathy Duchesne?
I think we're both in there, but Dawn's in there. Corey Dune's definitely in there.
Right, the name of the boat.
Yeah.
There's a question, is dinghy theft or damage an issue at any of these docks? I don't think so. We all got our own dinghies. No? Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen any dinghy go missing at Penny's, but people don't, and I've seen people leave them for a long periods of time and go up shore for quite a while, but they don't seem to go missing ever. There's too many boaters around.
Yeah.
And there's no place to go. Like, you can steal a dinghy, but where are you going to go? You can only go to like Britannia or Fitzroy. Like, we're landlocked in here. You're going to get bound sooner or later.
It's probably still a good idea to put your name on the boat. And yes. I always use plan B, like a painter, a line from the dinghy onto the boat, but also a second line or a second way of securing it, just in case one breaks or something happens. God knows what happens, but at least you have a plan B on your dinghy to hold both pieces.
Yeah, it's much more common I've never seen the dinghy stolen. I've seen many dinghies lost because the road came apart or somebody didn't tie it or something happened or someone ran over it or whatever, and they're drifting down the river.
Yeah, exactly.
It's something I worried about in our BVI charter, is every rental boat comes with a dinghy, motor dinghy. And I thought, boy, what do we do? We tie it up, we go ashore. Is it still going to be there when we come back? It didn't seem to be a problem there at all. But I imagine some places in the world it would be a problem.
I went all the way to Florida and back, and my wife and I went repeatedly into various people's docks and companies' docks and restaurants and so on, tied up the dinghy. And we might be back after dinner in a couple hours or what, but we never had a problem. In the sailing guide, the only place they talked about having a problem was in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So in any case, we never had any difficulty. There's a chap here. I have about 100 feet of chain. I came from Georgian Bay. If you don't need that much, how do you secure it? A nylon line to a cleat with a shackle for the chain. There are people on the Ottawa River that use all chain road, but then you need a way of providing some elasticity. Otherwise, the chain will basically it'll basically rip almost the cleat off the bow of your boat, I guess. Cathy, any comments?
There is ways to shorten the chain, of course. Don's behind me. He might have a comment.
If I just use basically dock lines with a hook, and I hooked the chain back to I tied the dock lines back to my cleats, and I put a hook through the chain so that I've got maybe 6 or 10 feet of half-inch line, half-inch dock line, so that the chain is not rattling all night, and use a kellet. So the kellet is going to give you a lot of elasticity. So,
Okay, yeah.
Another thing you could do is, I believe there's tools at the club to cut chain, and you could cut that 100-foot chain into sections and shackle the appropriate amounts together as you needed it.
Yep.
True.
no, can't do that if you have that.
True.
We all have this aversion to cutting line or cutting chain.
Yeah, and Don's just whispering in my ear, you can't do that if you've got a windlass, right? You can't put shackles in your chain
Oh,
if
right.
you're using a windlass.
Yeah. No, the Andy Hayden is my experience with an all-chain road.
Mhm.
And once the power winch on it went, that's a big disappointment in managing that boat.
There's a question, I'm not certain if I know exactly what it is, but what about lightning when you're anchored? And really, that's the reason you want to look at your weather forecast and decide if you want to be out there, if there's going to be a thunderstorm at 2 a.m. And I don't. But
that's why your mast is grounded with a big conductive cable to your keel.
most masts are not
Really?
from the manufacturer. Mine is because it was from the Florida area. I don't know about yours, Cathy. You're thinking?
I can tell you mine is not. And mine's a Catalina 34 as well.
Yeah.
I know that there's a note in the book. It's because the manufacturer doesn't want to guarantee that it'll work.
Well, I've read material saying that if your mast is not grounded, then the lightning will hit the top of the mast, come down, and blow the keel off your boat. But if it is grounded, then it'll have an even better path to the keel and blow the keel off your boat. And so you can win one way or you can win the other way. Or excuse me, I guess lose both ways, because either way you sink.
Wow.
When we were going,
Actually, that rarely happens. I think we need to point out that lots of boats have been out in lightning storms and nothing's happened.
oh yeah, I've been out in lightning storms and I shouldn't have been there. And
Just make sure you take down all the sail before.
the sails all come down, they'll tie them all up, and decide if you can find a big high point of land, like pulling into pinnies is good, and hover, or you're sort of huddling in there.
Yeah, of course, we started sailing long before there was really good weather forecasts. And so they, where you would go at hourly forecasts, there was always just a, 40% or 50% chance of thunderstorms, and we would have missed the whole summer. And so we've been out in many, many lightning storms in my career. Sailing.
Cathy, did you also, Greg, regularly go to Georgian Bay?
We've been a few times to Georgian Bay and have seen some amazingly spectacular lightning storms up there.
One thing that you can do is go to the Weather Network, and they have an excellent weather radar, and you can actually predict when the storm's going to hit your boat as it rolls down the river. You can see it coming and predict exactly when it's going to get there, and decide whether you want to be there when it does. So where are you allowed to pitch your camping trailer up the river? I'm not certain where you can pitch your camping trailer up the river.
That's right.
Oh, Fitzroy, yeah, okay, at the actual provincial campground.
Right.
The question, the name of Corey Dune, where did it come from, Cathy?
Well, it came with the boat.
Oh,
It came with the boat. When we bought the boat, it already had the name. And we decided not to change this because it was going to cost too much money to do it because it's a registered vessel. And
Oh.
and apparently it means snuggle down in Gaelic or something.
okay. There's an item called a chain grabber, which is at the chandlery, and I guess that provides some elasticity to an all-chain road.
Mhm.
So we have thanks from a number of people here. I've seen people hastily weigh anchor when a storm is coming and motor out into the river. Is it sometimes better not to be anchored during a storm? Cathy?
It depends on where you are and whether you think you're going to be on a lee shore.
Yeah.
So, and you should not, because the weather comes mostly from the west, you can often see those thunderstorm lines coming down the river. And the one thing you do not want to do is be in a channel in the middle of that because the winds are so unpredictable. So people will often stay out rather than be trying to get into the harbor in the middle of those kind of line squalls.
Right.
Yeah, we often, if we're about to hit a storm and we're at anchor at Penny's, for instance, or somewhere, then we'll often start the motor so that we can just literally hold the boat in place and just provide a little extra assistance to the anchor.
I was going to mention that, yeah, anytime we've been anchored and a storm comes through, we always start the engine just in case, because you don't want to be spending another 30 seconds trying to start it if the anchor's given way or you're starting to drift onto a lee shore. So, okay, not having been up the river, how far can you get in an easy day, and how long would it take to get all the way to Quillan from the Nepean?
That's a long day. It can be a one-day sail, but you'll be spending many hours doing it. It depends on the wind direction too, right? You have to tack all the way up to Quillan.
100 tacks.
Yeah, you might not make it there for dinner.
Normally 3 hours motoring will get you to Constance Bay. An hour and a half will get you to Penny's. Half an hour will get you just around the corner into, I think it's Shirley's Bay or just around the corner. And Moore Island is probably closer to 4 hours motoring. So, I mean, if you're sailing at 6 knots and you're going straight upriver, which you can't do normally, that'll give you an idea of how long it takes to get to various spots.
Yeah, when we go to Pontiac, we'd only do it if we had a long weekend.
Yeah. Can you repeat the lightning recommendations? Don't be there.
Weather forecast.
Look at the weather forecast. Weather Network shows you the actual weather radar. And if you look at the weather radar, it will show you the storm cloud coming down towards you, or perhaps you get lucky and it'll go down over Barhaven instead, or maybe in the Gatineau Hills instead. But it will show you exactly how quickly it's coming and when it's going to get there. So, Cathy, anything else?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. There's lots of radar now available to figure out where everything's going.
And in terms of lightning, basically you tie up everything to begin with, start your engine if you're anchored, because regardless of where you are, you want to make sure that you can sail off if necessary or move off if necessary.
Yes. Yes.
And I don't know if there's anything else we can add at this point.
I would add, get your foul weather gear ready or put it on if you're going to have to be at the helm. I made the mistake of not doing that once. And the temperature dropped about 10 degrees and hail was coming into the cockpit, and I started to get very cold.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, very much so. Good point.
And somebody was saying, should you head back to NSC? Well, I think, Cathy was saying before, you may not have time to get all the way back into NSC safely, so you're better off waiting it out and staying in a safe spot. Just turn the bow, get your sails down, head to the wind, and keep it there, and keep a good lookout for other boats that are maybe not being so cautious.
Probably turn on your running lights because the visibility may drop to very, very little.
Yeah, that's what I usually do. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, right at the very end of W dock is an emergency dock available to anybody that's coming in with engine trouble or perhaps in a storm like this. Don't try and get into your own slip wherever it is on A, B, C, or D, or E, or W. Just see if you can pull in there, tie up, and hold on till the storm passes, which will probably be in 20 minutes at the most. So, any case, we're running out of questions and we're past our normal time. So I want to thank both you, Cathy, and Rick for all the time and effort you put into these presentations. I think you are at the pinnacle of audience participation here with both questions and also the size of the audience interested in how to anchor and where to anchor. So we appreciate that very much. Now, before we go, I think this is something we'd like to present to both of you. I finally, after all this time, have sort of got this cap showing up properly. So each of you could make arrangements to go in and see Jamie and pick up a cap for yourself. And if you think that the winter is not quite finished yet, you can also get a toque instead. So whichever one you think tomorrow morning, maybe it's the toque you have to get. But please make arrangements to go in and see Jamie and pick up one for yourself. And thanks again for all your time.
Thank you, Mark. It's been fun.
So
Yeah.
in closing, I guess, remember next week, we're going to have March 30th. That will be Fraser Robideau. He's going to talk about getting your boat ready for launch and doing all your spring checklist of must-do items before you splash down. So thank you again, Cathy and Rick, and to all our audience. We'll see you again next week. Stay safe and stay well. Good night.
Bye, everybody. See you on the
Bye-bye.
water.